I'm Dr. Barry, licensed psychologist, and here we talk about true crime and psychology. Thank you so much for joining. Let's hop right into today's topic. Let's go. Welcome. And welcome you all. For some reason, I press some button and I get kicked out of the studio. I have no clue what that is about, but welcome. Thank you to the individual that recommended this case because I really hadn't heard about it. And so Austin Thompson, he was scheduled to go on trial for a major incident that happened in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I think it was about 3 years ago. I will share the details in just a minute. And I do have a summary listed down in the description. But throughout the entire trial, so he had a 2 week sentencing. And a part of this incident, he ended up with a self inflicted head injury that he had to recover from. And so I watched a forensic psychologist give testimony. There was also a psychiatrist that provided testimony and prior teachers. There were all of these people that spoke on his behalf. And something that they kept saying was that there weren't warning signs. But if you saw his search history, there was definitely concerning things happening. And the state is going to bring that up. Just for a quick overview, heads up, this is content warning for senseless harm to innocent people. I will share my screen because I have so Austin was 15 years old when this incident, because he pled guilty. So he elected to not have a trial and he pled guilty. I think he was trying to reduce his sentence because he faced 5 life sentences plus one of the victims survived. So he was facing an attempted charge for that individual. And also one of the individuals that died in the midst of this incident, his first victim was his brother. Okay. And so, uh, oh wow. Lisa, thank you for mentioning that. I hadn't seen that came forward. If his sentencing is publicized, please just let me know on a comment on a video, and I will definitely check it out if it doesn't come up in my algorithm. But back to Austin Thompson. So here are the different victims. So there's Nicole Connors, Mary Marshall, Susan Carnetz, the officer Gabriel Torres, and his brother James Thompson. And I believe it was his older brother. And the state, I think, does a very good job, really because they pretty much are like, no, we think he deserves the maximum. The defense wanted him to have an option for parole. And let's just go through the horrible details of this case. So it was all right. This incident started because it was in 2022. That's when this happened. And around 4 p.m., Austin and his brother, they finished playing video games, and Austin grabbed a 22 caliber rifle, and he YouTube, I can't say certain words, but his brother there was a pew pew to the back of the head, and he was still alive. And then Austin stabbed him 49 times. That is a lot. And then he left his house and he spotted Nicole Connors and Gardner as they were walking their dogs. And that's when Thompson fired 5 shots, unaliving Nicole Connors and her dog. And Gardner ended up with a fractured face. He then jogged up to Raleigh police officer Gabriel Torres, and he was sitting in his car, and he ended up, he pew-pewed him through the windshield. Okay. And it's my understanding that he is reloading throughout this time, and I think he had 2 weapons on him. The state is going to clarify all of those details in their closing arguments for why they believe he deserves the maximum. Okay. He then ran onto the Greenway. So Greenway, that's what it says. And that's where there were bypassers, Mary Marshall and Susan Carnatz. And there were people that he encountered and he did not. So he did not. So there were some children, I think, playing at a park that saw some of this, and they just ran away. But it's my understanding that before all of this happened, he researched like mass incidents. He researched like why do people like, or he was looking up people that enjoyed harming other people, which is, so that would be a red flag. It's different if you're like interested in the psychology of it and if you're interested in the forensics. He seemed interested in a way that placed him on that pathway to violence. Now, he was a good student. So he got A's, mostly some B's. There was some talk of maybe his parents were talking about separating. Like he was a good student. He was liked in school. There weren't those traditional like things that those traditional red flags. There was no sadness, there was no depression, anxiety. The defense is going to try to blame his acne medication, but he had been on the acne medication for a year. And the defense is going to try to claim depersonalization, that he didn't realize what he was doing. But with all the Google searches, with all of that other information, it's really hard to think that he did not know what he was doing. Okay. And so I do have a link to the full video where the state goes over everything. I am going to just hit some of the high points. All right. So we're going to start at the beginning of the opening statements, and I will turn on closed captioning. And we'll start at normal speed and see if we need to speed it up at all. Okay. So this is the prosecutor giving closing arguments.
As Your Honor is aware, this is a different scenario than we often find ourselves in this courthouse. And in a lot of regards, that's a good thing. But it makes this part of the process a little different. And I appreciate Your Honor. And I know that all of the victims' families in this case, and I feel confident that I can speak for counsel on both sides, that we appreciate your willingness to hear us all out on all of these issues and give us the time to go through all of these things so that you have a clearer picture about what actually happened, as opposed to, as we would often do in these types of cases, we would walk in, you just hear the guilty plea, we'd give you a 2-minute recitation, and then you're required to make a decision as to sentencing. And so I think it's beneficial for you to have been given a fuller picture by both sides. And when I sit back and I've thought about this case over the last 3 years or so, and over the last 2 weeks, and particularly this week, I don't want us to forget the people that were most affected by this. And I put them all up here, and it's been about a week until the end of the day today when we heard most of these people's names. And so I want to take a moment to remind Your Honor, not that I think you have forgotten in any way, but to give each of these people their moment again and remind you about James and about Lynn and Nicole and Gabe, little Layla even there, Susan, Mary, and Casey. Each of those people were walking about and going about their day-to-day lives that day on August the 13th, just like every other day. Day by day, things go by and you feel like nothing's ever going to change. And then in the blink of an eye, everything changed for those people and for the people that they left behind. And the thing that made it change was not some acne medication. It was the defendant's knowing, researched, well thought out, planned, decisive actions. This was not a youthful indiscretion. This is not the rare juvenile that is, or not the rare juvenile, he is the rare juvenile, I would submit.
So the amount of planning that went into this, so it seems like his plan, according the state believes his plan was to make it to the woods and then that there was going to be something more, that there was a bigger plan. He had researched making things that go boom. He had researched a lot of different things, and the state is going to go into that a little bit.
To you that has planned these things out. You heard the talk about brains and the juvenile evolution of the brain and where they are. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we continue down this path. But when you do that, we've heard all this discussion about context. Bear in mind where we are. The defendant has pled guilty to these offenses. This is not something where he's come in and says, from the jump street, I didn't know what I was doing. He pled guilty, and you have found and issued an order that premeditation and deliberation, there is evidence of that in this case. So I would argue, for your honor, and as I know you know, that's the only reason that we have to have this hearing, but keep that in your mind, because I think it's important when you look at the things that they have presented in their case that mitigate this. And the only thing that they've ever really pointed to, I would submit to you, is this idea of this depersonalization being the issue. They can latch on to the arguments that maybe he wasn't on these pathway to violence. It's irrefutable. He was on a pathway to violence. He was at the start of that and made it all the way on to the path of violence.
And so I think the defense was saying that there wasn't this buildup over a period of time, but the state is saying that day he made choices that placed him on that path. A lot of this seems senseless because it doesn't sound like he had a bad relationship with his brother. The state believes that maybe his brother would have stopped him from doing the plan. And so that's why, because he changed clothes. So he ended up putting on camouflage and so all of that is just very, very concerning.
He committed violence not once, not twice, not 3 times, 7 times that day. He terrorized an entire community for over an hour. To say that he was acting and didn't have a plan and know what was going on, I would submit to your honor, it is not believable when you look at the totality of the circumstances here. And so I want to start out and talking a little bit about something that the experts for the defense have raised. Dr. Corbin talked about it, and he said that his goal here was to find out why. That's not what his goal was, Your Honor. It's not what is supposed to be what his goal was.
So, and I think that was I think that was the psychiatrist that just said, even based on meeting with him, based on talking with him, there is no clear why he did this. That even the psychologist that met with him after the fact, there is no clear why. The state believes that he was taking out like people that he might have thought would have called the police or that might have stopped him. That's how the state sees this. But yeah.
His goal was supposed to just be to give your honor some indication about the defendant's mental state, not why he did what he did, but could he understand what he was doing? Why is something for us that we all want, we all hope to get at some point. The victims I know would love to have the answer to that question. The defendant's parents have asked from day one, why would he do this? The reality is we will probably never know why he did this. We do know that he did it. And I would submit to you, you know that he knew what he was doing when he did it. And the why is not the inquiry that this court is here to decide today. What you're here to decide at the end of this day is, what is the appropriate sentence for what happened? Now, sure, if you have why, that's something that you can consider. But it's like we tell jurors all the time, the motive doesn't matter. It can be helpful, but it's not dispositive. And so
that's where, so there was no history of harm to other people, no history of harm to animals. There really weren't the typical red flags that we looked. The only red flag there was that I saw was his search history. And even after this incident, he's been described as like a model inmate. Like he hasn't had fights or had issues in because he was in a treatment facility first. Because at the end of the thing, he turned the weapon on himself, and I don't think he expected to survive. But that's where I don't know if the goal was to be one of those like infamous people. Like if his goal was for his name to be known, like that's where it just gets a little bit strange. But and I think that's why the fellow psych nerd asked me to cover this, because there weren't those traditional. He did well in school. He had a good relationship with his parents, no history of trauma. The only might have been little issue, like if the parents were going to separate, but you wouldn't think somebody would become like, there wouldn't be this type of reaction to something like that. And so I don't know that any of that had anything to do with this. It seems like this was something that he wanted to do, which points more down the like evil versus psychology. So that there was this antisocial, like against social norms, because we have a social norm that we don't harm one another, that we try to be kind to one another. This wasn't good. Okay, I'll keep it going.
talk about what they have presented as why, and it's this drug-induced depersonalization. But where do they get this from? They get it from this idea of minocycline, their expert opinions, and I've put question marks beside that because I'd submit to you there is zero expert opinion.
And so I'm going to fast forward past the acne medication part because the state is going to explain that the acne medication he was on, he had been on it for a year. And the people that describe depersonalization from having that medication, they experienced those symptoms within like the first week or two. And he had been on it for a year. And I agree. Some people just don't get that social norm. I agree. Okay. And so let me just skip ahead a little bit past talking about this part. He's going to get into his search history. Okay, there we go. All right. Yeah. Because he was described as a good kid that they didn't really have a lot of concerns about. He did well. All right. So let's start from about here.
Don't make sense. Okay, well, why? He wasn't overly concerned with the planet. I never saw that he was overly concerned about that, and that's the reason why I put that there. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Okay, but other people have used that as a reason why, correct? Well, yeah, I've seen that before. Okay, and he actually did search that in his computer a couple of times at least, right? Yeah, he did. But that doesn't make sense. The reason that he killed James is because he says he's going to get in his way. He couldn't fathom that was a reasonable reason.
His brother, James, was his brother.
For someone to write down in there as to why they would kill their brother. Okay.
I skipped over the part where, so the state mentioned he left notes. He left notes for his parents. He left a note for the police. He left different notes. And so the state is going over the writings that he left. And I think something that he wrote down was that he didn't want his brother to get in the way of his plan.
And even today, Dr. Sapia, she seemed, well, it doesn't make any sense. But when you look at the context of what happened and what's in that letter, does it not make sense? Every witness has told you James was a good kid, smart, athletic, well-behaved, no issues out of him. If the defendant has in his mind a fixed purpose, I'm going to go out here and I'm going to commit mass violence for whatever reason it is. And I'd submit to you, it might have just been, and even when you look at his search history, that he just wanted to experience it, or he had some other plan, and this was just the first step of the plan. Well, if he's going to do that, he's got to get by Big Brother. And we all heard James is a little guy. You saw Austin's a little guy. James is bigger. We saw the pictures that were presented in this courtroom about it all. Is he going to beat him in a fist fight?
No.
No. And when you go back through and look at the search history, I'd submit to you, he's been planning, how do I, for years, months, how do I subdue somebody? Can I hit him in the head with a blunt object? What does it take to knock somebody out? What does it take for a 22 to penetrate the skull? If he's wanting to get out there, you've got this good brother that you know, by all accounts, is going to do everything he can to stop this terrible thing from happening. And we know how Austin had to dress when he walked out there to do it. He's come home. He's changed now. He's in all camouflage. He's got a rifle that's as big as he is and a 22-pound backpack. And he goes to the front door. You don't think James is going to look at him and say, "Hey, buddy, what are you doing? Put the gun away. This isn't what we do. You don't go out here and hunt in the neighborhood. It's going to take the gun away from him." So what does Austin decide to do? The only way that I'm going to be able to achieve my objective, and as we've heard from all the witnesses, he's a goal-oriented person. He does what he has to do to get to the thing that he wants to do. I have to kill my brother, even though we don't have a long-standing antagonistic relationship. I have to kill him to achieve my next goal. Sorry about it, but this is the way it needs to be. And so what does he do? He does exactly what he had researched. He shoots him in the back of the head, and then he cuts his throat, stabbing him and injuring his voice box, which we'll look at later. So does this note really not make sense? I'd submit to you, that's them minimizing because they know, oh, this is bad for whatever this opinion that I want to have is, that I want to convince this court for my goal of trying to help this guy out so he doesn't get the stiffer sentence because he's the one that has hired me to come in here and do this.
Objection hired.
Then they latch on to the structure.
I'll sustain the objection, but I'm going to comment on it.
Then they move on to this idea of, well, it looks weird. It's disjointed. It's written weird. They're misspelled words. Okay.
So he's still talking about the note, that the writing looks weird.
But then you go on, you look at schoolwork. The handwriting looks exactly the same. Misspelled words in the schoolwork. They're scribbled out parts. It's disjointed looking. It's the way he writes. He's a kid at the time in 2022 who's been doing computer work. We don't teach people how to have nice, neat handwriting and calligraphy as much anymore. I think that's a well-known fact. So I would say that's not an issue here. He is acting as he normally acted at the time. These are not really signs that this is a person that doesn't know what's going on. And these are weak reasons to jump to the most far-fetched of excuses that even they would admit. Dr. Corbin said on direct testimony, he looks at me and says, "I admit it's very, very rare," even to the point that he wasn't even considering this at first until he had removed all the logical reasons, I would say, that do exist from this, because those logical reasons don't advance the goal. So these are the things that he ignores. And he says, well, context and moderation matter. And we'll talk about that. But I have no concern about these violent search histories. None. It's so common. I watched Faces of Death.
So just because somebody searches something does not mean that they will definitely do a thing. That is correct. And yet, for looking back, being the Monday morning quarterback, looking back at these things, there could have been some red flags. How would you ever know that your child was searching? Like you wouldn't know. And like I said, there weren't the normal red flags of something going on. I'm going to keep it going.
Many times, I did all these things. I see it every day. These students and people come in with looking at violent content. Don't disagree. How many of those people have acted on it, though? That's the context that we are here on. Is it a red flag that this person had consumed that much violent content, sought it out, and sought out specific violent content that relates to the thing that he goes and does later. If that's not a red flag to you, at least in hindsight, then I question that opinion.
It's a red flag.
He says there's no ramping up. I would submit to Your Honor, go back and look at that exhibit. If you haven't already, you may have, but I would say
and they're going to talk about the number of times that he searched different things. That is what he's going to go into. He's trying to dispel the prior testimony of the defense experts. That's what he's trying to do right now. All right. So let's go ahead and play from here.
more suspicious if he's wearing a face mask and you can't really pass off as an innocent 15-year-old hunter when you're trying to get away from the police at that point. So these attempts to flee, he discusses the consequences in his note. He discusses the consequences with Google. He's on this drug for over a year with zero interactions negatively with it. And then you consider all the choices and considerations that he makes while he's walking around. You heard from multiple people that the defendant, when he is going through, he makes decisions about who to shoot. He doesn't shoot. And when you watch the video, there are people out and about. There's kids out there walking by. And on one of the videos, I would submit to you, those kids hear and see what's going on. That's why one of the kids starts screaming for the other kid, because you hear the gunshots go off, and then you hear the kid calling for the other kid in a screaming way. And in one of the videos, you hear gunshots, and you see kids dispersing in the far off fielded area. He's making choices. He points the gun at Nathan. He doesn't shoot because he's got this shotgun that he has researched and knows the distances of that are most deadly. All of the killings that he does are close.
And so the state is assuming why right there. So we may never know why he chose what he chose, but it does seem like the victims that he did end up shooting, that it was closer range. So keep it going.
Up in person and on his path to safety in the woods so he can carry out whatever the next portion of the plan is. And we know there's a next portion of the plan because when you look at what he's searching, he wants there to be more. If this was the end of the plan, he wouldn't have had hundreds of rounds of shotgun shells, three extra magazines for a 9mm. He wouldn't have reloaded the gun multiple times as he's walking through carrying out this action. This isn't somebody who picked up the water and poured it, or the coffee and poured it in the thing that they thought was a cup and wasn't a cup in their hand. This is somebody who knows what's happening and has carrying out a complex plan in their mind to make it to the woods to avoid capture. He's taken with him things to survive, $700+. He's taken with him multiple pieces of food and water, fire starters, self-care things, multiple things of contact lenses, pockets full of ammunition, fishing line, flint starters, a change of clothes, deodorant, toilet paper. He was going out to survive in the woods like Eric Rudolph and his other heroes that he had researched over a course of time. And it bears out by the reliable and physical, observable, tangible evidence in this case, not fanciful theories and unproven experiments that they don't even want to sign on to in this court of law because they know that it's not accurate, I would submit to Your Honor. Because if they really believed that's what the case was and that the evidence supported it, why wouldn't they put it in their report that that is their opinion? So these are 80s unproven experiments versus verifiable, tangible, observable evidence. So let's talk about Dr. Sapia today. She doesn't sign on to this depersonalization. They say, well, that wasn't your goal. But she told you she heard the testimony. She didn't say she agreed with that determination. She reviewed all the same things. She has the same credentials. If she had a concern or question about depersonalization, why doesn't she write in there, I think that it's not my job to determine this, but I have serious concerns that he was suffering from depersonalization, because the other two wouldn't sign off on it either. She discusses, for the most part, generalized brain development for a youth. And it's interesting, and when you look at the cases, and I know Your Honor has and will, when you look at the cases on all these things, you can kind of determine that that's not enough here when you start looking at the determination. It's certainly something for you to consider, but it's not the be-all, end-all of this. And she admits to Your Honor that this spectrum of young people, you know, there are very immature people who have very poor impulse control, and there are young people who have good impulse control and are very mature. But it seems like when you listen to her testimony, she tries to default to the lower end of that spectrum, as opposed to saying, the evidence in this case indicates that the defendant was on the better end of that, the more mature end of that. When you look at all the people that talk about him, every single person, to a person, he was very intelligent. He was goal-oriented. He knew how to do what he needed to do to get along, to move it to the next thing, to get to be able to play video games. He was smart enough to bypass computer systems to get to the games while he's in school. He is able to essentially fend for themselves for several hours a day. We let 15-year-olds drive cars and learn how to drive cars for a reason. He's not a 10-year-old that we're talking about here. He's a 15-year-old young man at this point who is on the mature end of that, I would submit, at least publicly, that he is showing responsibility. Parents felt that he was so mature, they left 13 or 11 guns unsecured in the home because we trust that he knows how to handle.
So no matter how intelligent you believe your children are, my personal thing is that things should always be secure, where only the parents have access. It's okay to go hunting with your kids, but make sure that they don't have access to things in between. Because the adolescent brain doesn't finish developing until 25. And so would he have made this decision at 25? I don't know. Adolescents do have trouble thinking long term. So the one forensic psychologist, she talked about how teenagers, they feel like 40 is old. So I'm 43. And I remember when I was 13 or 15, maybe even 20, 40 felt so far away. And like, I can remember being 13, like it feels like yesterday, and it wasn't. And so, would he have made the same decision later? We don't know, but he did. And I will just go ahead and tell you all, spoiler alert, the judge did sentence him to 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole, because it was five life sentences. That's what he was sentenced to. He's going to get into the details of the search history. Okay.
Himself around firearms. No concerns about that. So when you're looking at this spectrum, I would submit to you again, she's shading it to one end without any real reason to shade it to that end of the lower end of maturity here. It was interesting to me when she was talking about the reasons for concern for young people is that their actions are so reactive. They are she listed like 3 factors that were things that she.
Okay, so this is a really great question because we saw in the Ethan Crumbley. So Ethan Crumbley case, his parents, they purchased the weapon for him that he ended up using in the school incident. Now, he had multiple red flags. He was clearly depressed. He did not. So I agreed with the jury that the parents, in my just personal thoughts and opinion, I felt like they were negligent and he should not have had access to weapons unsecure legally. There is no law that says parents have to lock up their weapons. For civil responsibility, possibly. I don't know, because he also did the thing to his brother too. And so I don't know if any of the victims would sue the estate or sue the parents criminally. I don't think there were those big red flags that would say make sure this child doesn't have access to a weapon. I don't think that was there. So yeah, I think that's why the state just decided to press charges against him. Now, if he had went to the school, which is weird, because like, well, what's the difference with that? Ay. But everybody said that with this kid, there were no red flags. So, wow. Yep. And there was an incident in Georgia. Yes, I've been following that one. The father is on trial. Yep. I will have to keep an eye on that one. Y'all both were thinking the same thing. All right, so the letter, and I haven't read all of the letter. cases like that, because this just feels evil. This does not, there is no clinical diagnosis. Now, post injury, he did end up with major neurological deficits because he ended up damaging his prefrontal cortex. He survived. It's a miracle that he survived what he did. He had to relearn how to walk, talk. His initial IQ was in the borderline range. It was in the 70s. He was tested again about a year later, and it was up to the 90s. And they believe that pre-incident, his intelligence was likely in the average range. So, all right, let's keep it going.
Said, they can make good decisions if these are the factors that are in place. And she listed each of those factors. I remember at least two of them. I think I don't have my notes about her in front of me, but it was one of the big ones for her was peer pressure and impulse, a reason for impulse control here. When you look at what there's, and I know you took great notes, when you look at what the reasons she listed were for reasons that could exist that a young person would make good decisions and not be active, every one of them applied to the defendant on October the 13th. There's zero peer pressure on him to do this. He was not in a highly emotional state from all testimony that you heard. And when you look at the history of all of this, it's not him so out there, emotionally reacting like a second degree type of murder type thing. This is a thought out, methodical process that today was the day, for whatever reason, he was going to put that plan into motion. He researched the exact actions that he took. That's not reactive. That is proactive.
That's planning.
Dr. Sapia, never even looked at all the evidence in the case.
So the forensic psychologist, she didn't look at the digital, which is, the defense didn't give her the digital, his search history.
She's the one who's supposed to tell you, in her opinion, he's going to benefit from all these factors that you need to consider later on. And she hasn't even reviewed all of the documents. She talked to the kid for 2.5 hours and read his medical records, didn't watch these videos, didn't look at the phone searches, said, I'm generally aware of them, but I didn't spend any time looking through them. I mean, everybody says nobody knew what was going on in his mind. We have tangible documentation about what was going on in his mind because, they used to say the eyes are the window into the soul. I think in 2026, it's probably the cell phone is the window into your soul.
I agree.
Okay. I mean, you look at your deepest, darkest secrets are on your cell phone. We see it every day in this courtroom and in this courthouse, right? That's where people tell the truth. They may not tell the truth to mom. They may not tell the truth to dad, to their friends, to their internet friends. Google sure knows the truth about us because we're not smart enough not to Google things that we're really thinking about and considering. And if you look at his Google history, it's all in there. She didn't care to look at it. She could have had it. She could have asked for it, but she didn't. And she comes in here and gives you an opinion that she wants you to base a decision off of that I would submit to you is half cooked because you're not looking at the totality.
I'm gonna fast forward to when he starts looking at the digital evidence. I think he's getting it to it here.
They continue to talk about his continued improvement. And I would submit to you, you heard Dr. Corvin talking about this, and you heard Dr. Sapia talking about this, and their prognoses seem to be very different to me. Dr. Corvin described how brutal these things were, this injury was, and he's not going to fully recover. He blew half his brain out, I think he wanted to say at some point. The catastrophic injuries. He'll never be the same person that he was then. Dr. Sapia, the brain's malleable. I think, if the breaks, he's going to continue to improve. But she can't say that for sure.
Nobody knows.
She says it's trended that way. But what way is it trending? It's trending in a very controlled, kid glove type environment for this person, okay, which is not where he's going to be moving forward. Bad information in, bad information out. One of the things she held on to tight when questioned about it was, well, we know he hadn't had any issues with impulse control or being interested in these sorts of things since then. He's been improving. But she told you, when she met with him, she noted impulse control. We're 3 years later. Yeah, he's improved, but he's still not even back to what he was at 15-year-old Austin. So they want you to say, no, I'm going to trust that he's going to improve and benefit great enough from being in custody and receiving the treatment while he's in there. Okay. But I would also ask you to consider what Casey Clark said to you. This is what a 15-year-old without training and very little experience is able to do. Imagine what a 45-year-old is able to do if he's not sentenced to what the state's asking for. And a 25-year-old, I've got it here. I said his brake fluid's always going to be low because they keep using the brake analogy through the doctor. I mean, what is just done to this frontal cortex that is catastrophic, that is the thing that controls your impulse control, which he clearly already had an issue with. If you listen to them, by going out and doing this action, he obliterates that part of his brain, but he's going to be fine moving forward. It doesn't make sense, I would submit to you. Yes, he's growing, he's aging, and he's a different.
I'm trying to get to the digital evidence. He's getting to it soon. All right.
Of it. This is from January of 2020. Remember, he got his phone Christmas Day coming into this. So the EI time, January 1st, he's already looking up rifles for sale near him and 9mm near him, magazines near him. The second day, all school shootings done with a pistol. This is before he's on this medical.
Red flag. He has his phone less than a month, less than like 6 days. So gets his phone on Christmas, and January 1st is already searching for pew-pews and school incidents. That's a red flag. But I don't think the parents could have known fully.
Listen, mind you. Then you go on down 3-4 days into the month. Name of the Virginia Tech shooter. Virginia Tech shooting. When was the Virginia Tech shooting? What gun was used?
Dang. So you all know I am a graduate of Virginia Tech. I was not on campus, so I had already graduated. That incident, I know it was 2007. It was April 2007, and his last name, I want to say his last name was Cho. This individual so the Virginia Tech incident, he was likely getting rejected by girls, not adjusting well on campus, severe depression, not adjusting well at all, and was writing very dark, deep things. My former professor, Nikki Giovanni, she actually wasn't comfortable with him being in her creative writing course because of the things he was writing. She was concerned for safety. He was assessed. Prior to the incident, they attempted to have him hospitalized against his will, and he was deemed not to be a risk. And then we had the incident happen. And so, wow, the fact that he was researching that one specifically, that touches my home directly.
In the Nevada middle school shooting. Which gun was used in the Indiana middle school shooting? What gun was used in Virginia Beach shooting? That same day. Worst shootings ever in North Carolina. Worst mass shootings in North Carolina history. Carthage nursing home shooting. 38 caliber images. You move on here. What is the motive behind the Stone Douglas High School? Who invented school? Some addresses, the differences between guns, a middle school.
So I don't think he liked school, but lots of people don't like school. Yeah. So Nikki Giovanni, may she rest in peace. I took 2 or 3 classes with her. So I was going to take her creative writing course, but it was a whole bunch of work. So a good friend of mine did take it. And one of my friends was very, very close with Nikki Giovanni. I was also able to see her speak. Because she has books and she does book tour. She did book tours. She passed. She was really, really amazing. But yeah. So I know 5 life sentences. I'll have to look that up. I'll have to look up. I know it's 5 life sentences plus some additional years for the attempt because he was charged for the people that survived. So let's keep it going.
How many rounds were fired in Parkland shooting? Gas chamber images?
Ugh.
Just a smattering of the searches. You have it before you. Keep going and still in that first month. how to get somebody's IP address. He's smart. Making explosive box, materials for making explosives, explosive material, acetone. How many human trafficking? How many percentage of gun deaths with illegal guns? Middle school shooting was the deadliest. Deadliest high school shooting, deadliest middle school shooting. How many people died at Westside Middle School shooting? More a speed loader for a gun. Amazon gift cards. Ruger 54. How many rounds fired at Virginia Tech Stadium? Worst school shootings with handguns. Then he looks up a handgun for sale near him. Then you move into July through September.
That's concerning.
Another school shooting. How many people did Eric Rudolph kill? Bombers. Rifle was used by that killer. More rifles. What caliber do snipers use? How fast can a bullet travel? What bombing and shooting spree on July 22? The differences between buckshot and double-aught buck. Will number 2 shot?
So knowing what we know now, the search history is incredibly concerning. And I think he likely wanted to do more than what happened. That was likely the initial plan. And to me, to like start with your brother and then just go to random people, like that's just, and I don't think he expected to survive. I don't think he wanted consequences. So that's why I do like the 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole. That is very dark, and that is very, very concerning. Very, very concerning. So normally with a so in clinical psychology, we have a diagnosis, antisocial personality disorder. And so a person can have antisocial behavior without meeting criteria for the full diagnosis. So I talk from a clinical perspective. This one incident could probably, but it seems like there was a mask with him because he tries to follow rules. So even the forensic psychologist talked about meeting with him, and he was very aware of there was a point system, and he was on the highest point level. He had the highest privileges. So he doesn't have this pattern. So to me, the best example of like a full-blown sociopath is Wade Wilson. Wade Wilson, or I covered a sentencing a guy that was actually he was asking to be put to death. Like it was just very, very strange. It was very, very odd. This individual, it seems like there was this fascination with killing. Like that's what it seems like to me. But yeah. All right, let's keep it going.
Gun shells kill a human. Then he goes into the Parkland shootings, assault weapons deaths, most mass shootings with illegal weapons. Again, we're back to Eric Rudolph, who, as Your Honor, I'm sure is aware, hiding out in the woods after he commits mass murders. We're on the Eric Rudolph train. What evidence do they have against Eric Rudolph? Is he still alive? What prison is he in?
We're only on January 10th, maybe 13th. Maybe this is October. Maybe it's October. Maybe we're into October. This is just a lot. This is a lot.
How is dynamite created? Starts looking into dynamite and things further. Is it illegal to have guns in school or guns in your room?
Oh.
He continues on with lots of searches for Cabela's and Bass Pro Shop. Yes, he was a hunter. But why is that important? When you look at his note, is it consistent that he might go to Cabela's to steal weapons or to steal ammunition? Can a minor buy a rifle? Can a minor possess a handgun?
No.
Fascination with these sorts of things. Then you're back on to bombings, Vegas shootings, Timothy McVeigh, ammonium nitrate, ISIS road bombs. How many shooters were in Las Vegas? Where in the mountains was Eric Rudolph hiding? Which serial killer are you?
Oh, probably a quick.
Serial killer that killed for the thrill. Serial killer that killed for fun. January of 21, more dynamite. Again, what gun is used? More bomb making materials, more bomb making stuff.
Oh. I think the date I'm seeing is the date of the extraction. Okay. So let me clarify that. The October, I think we're still in January. I think this is the date of the extraction. Those are the numbers that we can see. This is troubling.
Ammonium nitrate, ratios, cups to gallons, how many cups are in 8 ounces, fuel, which fuel per gallon, researching how do I create bombs. And I'd submit to you, he's fascinated with these bombs. That's the goal. And then he realizes, I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm not going to be able to do the bomb thing. I'm not going to be able to do the bank robbery thing. I've got guns. Let's transition to that philosophy, which I'm already interested in. And that's how I'm going to make my name for myself. That's how I'm going to move forward with my mass shooting. Again, more weapons-based or more bomb-based materials. Abortion clinics near me.
Oh.
Now we're in October of 21. Is AK-47 a terrorist weapons? Starts looking up killings here. How many murders were solved in North Carolina? How much is a sentence for prostitution? We're not saying that he was prostituting himself, but let's be honest, what goes hand in hand together? Crime like this, and I would submit to you interest in sexual deviant type things. I'm not saying.
So we may never know, because it looked like he would looked up trafficking as well. So that's where that's creepy.
Saying that he was a sexual deviant, but those are interests that I think it's clear in the world that these types of people who commit mass shootings and things are interested in. Forensic files, TV shows, persons in North Carolina shot with rifle and murder. He starts looking at 12-gauge shotguns, minimum sentences. Again, this is important when you move on to your factors about what can you consider. Again, we're looking at robbing banks, the types of weapons that he can have. Can I buy a machine gun? Accessories. We're moving on. Again, we're at Cabela's. And if you go back and look at the search history and the things that he was looking at, he's in shopping at Cabela's. It would appear to one of the favorite places for him. Is a slug or buckshot more lethal? How many people died in Tiananmen? What ammo does the military use for shotguns? None of this was concerning to the doctor. I would submit to you, it should be concerning to anybody that's looking at this when you've got a 15-year-old looking at these sorts of things, even at this level.
Yeah, all of that was very concerning. Lisa asked a great question about the Supreme Court. Can a juvenile be sentenced to life without parole? So that's why they had to have this longer hearing, because I think in order to sentence a juvenile to life without the possibility of parole, you normally have to have a hearing that determines it. Sometimes they call it a Miller hearing. I don't know if that's what they called it here. Ethan Crumbly had that, but there's no mandatory life. So Miller versus Alabama 2012 banned mandatory life without parole. So the judge has to consider the juvenile's age and circumstances prior to the sentence. There was in 2010, I think there was a ban maybe on life without parole for juveniles convicted of non-homicide crimes. And yes, we talked about Miller. 28 states and the District of Columbia have banned juvenile life without parole as of 2024. So there are some states that have banned it. All right. I hope that's helpful. Let's keep it going a little bit.
This isn't everything. So again, I mean, you can see it, police codes, robbing banks. What is the statute of limitations for attempted murder? Now we're in August of 22. We're back in the school shootings. Mom and dad stabbed to death. Mass shooter hates humans. Important when you look at the note in just a couple minutes. He's ramping up at this point when you start looking at the things that we're talking about. This usacrime.com, when you look at the searches of what he's looking at on there, it's video after video after video, story after story of violence. He starts looking at.
And just because somebody is looking at or is interested in certain types of content does not necessarily mean that they will act on it. But the concern is if they have access to weapons. And because he had no prior violence prior to this incident. Which is normally there's a ramping up. There was no ramp up for it was just this incident.
I'm assuming that's supposed to be Molotov cocktails, voice box in the throat. Can someone talk when their voice box is code? It's foreshadowing. Looking up what he's going to do. What is the average response time for an SRO to a shooting? How to counter thermal imaging, school shootings. Eric Freem, another mass shooter who shot up a barracks in Pennsylvania, evaded the police for 30, 40 days while hiding where? In the woods. Can juveniles get the death penalty? Consequences. When is he looking at that? 2 months before he goes and commits his mass murders, his free shooting. September of 2022, we're back here. We're looking at silent ways to kill people with a knife, scanners, active shooter police code, homicidal ideation. Is there a silent way to kill someone? Why do white males kill themselves more often in the US? Pistols, youngest cop killer in history. How long does it take for someone to die from a knife? How fast will a gun kill when it hits vital organs? When do the leaves fall from a tree in Raleigh? How many times did the Uvalde shooter's mother? A bunch of searches about that. Can you hear a gunshot from inside someone's house? Do people scream when being stabbed in the neck?
It's getting darker. And we're getting closer to the incident. So was the brother? Yes. Everybody else was a pew-pew. Yes. The brother was the only one. And I don't know if that was to try out because he's searching the voice box thing. That's just very weird to search that, I think.
People scream when being stabbed. How long does a bullet-proof vest last for? Start searching those types of things. How much does 100 shotgun shells weigh? You heard he had hundreds of shotgun shells that he carried in a 22-pound backpack. Again, he's looking at extension tubes. How fast do officers respond to shootings? How fast does a 22 have to go to penetrate the skull? I mean, this isn't a red flag. Why do we need to know banks near the high school, right? Right after you've searched how much ammo do guerrilla warfares carry? Uvalde Elementary School. Who killed the most people ever solo? Mass shooters who hated society. Worst school massacre in the world. Toxic masculinity. Kid found dead. Guns. Deadly school.
So with the toxic masculinity, I was wondering if he was listening to some of those podcasts, those very out there, I don't know, those, because sometimes the algorithm can feed, especially lonely boys. Sometimes the algorithm can feed them some stuff that goes down a very, very odd place. This is just very, very concerning. And I don't think the parents had any clue.
School massacres. Now we're finally in October. He's never been interested in the environment. We've got a lot of searches, and these are just a few because when you go back through, there's a lot of searches about hurricanes. I would submit to you he's a hunter. Hunters tend to care about conservation and the environment. It's not out of the realm of possibility that that's something that he latched onto. Do police chase suspect policies? Why is that important? Do they go in the woods by themselves to pursue someone? How deadly is double-aught buckshot? I mean, talks about dry ammo. Why is that important? Because then he goes and uses Ziploc bags to keep his ammunition. I would submit he's learning, he's keeping his ammunition dry, moving forward. Easier to carry it that way. On the day of, during the event, he's searching himself, trying to figure out what's going on, where are they, so he knows where he can be, where to go. He's following his own greatest hits. He's seeing what's going on and knowing that these people are around him. And this is right after he's searching, do the police go to the woods for an armed suspect a couple of days before, right? Why is that important? What does it mean to hate society a couple of days before? He's thinking about these things. It's not a sudden onset. It's not a reaction. These are things that don't have EI times, but Dylan, look at all these. These are all mass killers. Attempted sentences in North Carolina. Silent ways to kill. More bombs. Statutes of limitations. Breaking in. Lockpick sets.
all of that, very, very concerning. Very, very concerning. Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. He searched himself during the act. Oh, yeah. Yes. Very, very he was 15 years old and good student, good kid, A's, I think 3.8 GPA, no issues at school, no discipline issues, no history of aggression. I think there was a side of him that nobody knew. I think there was a side of him that was maybe fascinated with some of these things and nobody knew it. And he might have hunted animals, but I don't see hunting. So like people now, if people are going above and beyond, like if they're harming, because normally hunters, they with ethical hunting, so I'm not a hunter, okay? I'm not a hunter, but it's my understanding that they try to not cause the animal pain. So they don't want the animal to suffer. There are some people that might use it as a way to like make things suffer, and then that would have been a red flag. But your son said Pokemon, Pokemon, Pokemon. I love that. I love that. I love that. Um and so that case, thank you once again to the individual that asked me to cover it. He was sentenced to 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole. The judge specifically talked about the victims and the things that people had said about them. Those were innocent people that ended up caught in a, to me, evil, horrific plot and plan. And I do hope that people can heal. So I think after he damaged his prefrontal cortex, so he doesn't show emotions well now. I think he did play sports. I think he was popular. He didn't like school, but not in a way that was, overly negative. He just wasn't a big fan of school. Hey, buddy. What? Oh, you have Pokemon? Can I see? Which one? Cyndaquil. Cool. Okay, here you go. You can take it. Thank you for letting me parent. Okay, you're going to take that? Okay, good. All right. And so that was this case. We are going to hop over and talk about Juliana Perez Mangale. I can't say her last name, but in the Brendan Banfield case, she was sentenced on Friday, and Judge Penny, she did a phenomenal job. So we are going to talk about that, and we're also going to talk about love bombing and trauma bonds. So we are going to talk about the cycle of trauma bonding and the difference between a trauma bond and a healthy love. So just kind of talking about the differences between those two things, red flags in relationships in honor of today being Valentine's Day. If you do not want to stay on for that, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Be kind to one another. Don't do crimes. And I will see you all next time. Have a good one. Bye.